Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you back to WHTC's Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, April 15th. I'm Gary Stevens. We'll be open line following the 11 o'clock news. But in this segment, we are joined via the Zoom connection with Zeeland Public School Superintendent Cal DeKuiper. Cal, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
And good morning, Gary. It's, I appreciate doing this by Zoom. I always appreciate the face-to-face conversation so much more than by phone. So thanks for this.
Appreciate that. And of course, you can join us not in the Zoom conversation, but you out there can join in the conversation with your questions at 395-1450, 395-1450. When we scheduled this conversation with Cal DeKuiper, the original thought was that we were going to, I just had to get things in order here. We were going to have Cal talk about a bond issue, a 9-figure bond issue for Zeeland Public Schools that would be before voters in the May 5th election. But COVID-19 changed all that, but we still asked Cal to continue the commitment, which he has graciously done. And you mentioned in a previous conversation that we had on WHTC Morning News, the wise rationale for pushing back that vote. Tell us, for those who may have missed that conversation, why Zeeland Public Schools decided not to have the election on May 5.
Yeah, no, thank you. There's a number of reasons, but number one, it's the economics of today, the safety of people trying to vote, and not being able to get the information out to the voters. So normally we do so much of our work. We just want the voter group to be properly informed and then they make a good decision. But if we can't get them the information in a timely fashion, then that really requires us to back off. So we feel really good about the decision. We have a gracious community who cares about us, and if we do things right in the future, and we'll probably have to do some of the things, we might revise it, but we'll regroup another day.
We mentioned this to Justin Roebuck last week when we had a conversation with him. The fact that only 3 issues are on the Ottawa County ballot. Kennewa Hills has a bond issue for the eastern part of the county, but also Grand Haven and Hudsonville are holding their elections because their 18 mil non-homestead property tax would expire in June. They could not afford to push it back. So that leads me to this, Cal. How long can Zeeland hold off on this? Maybe August, maybe November. You really can't push it too far back, can you?
Sure. Interestingly, we could. We had 2 things on the ballot: the 18 mil renewal, which you do every single year, and it's kind of a requirement, really, of the budget process, and then the bond campaign. So let's just talk about that 18 mil. A number of years ago, and it's kind of complex, but a lot of things fell in our favor that we actually vote for a year out. So where Hudsonville and the Grand Haven, they would vote in May for a budget that takes effect a month later in June or July. Ours would actually be June or July a year from now. And we did that intentionally. We voted 2 years out one time so that we're not always stressed with perhaps cutting 15% or 10% of our budget within a few days of having to have the budget due. So we're fairly fortunate with that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can hold off and have that vote a little bit later on.
Yeah,
if you have a question for Zeeland School Superintendent Cal DeKuiper, he'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. About an hour and a half or so ago, we had our segment with Holland Public Schools talking about their remote learning plan that will be rolled out on Monday. More on that, the podcast on our website at WHTC.com. Well, we have you here and with our good graces today. Tell us a little bit about Zeeland's remote learning as opposed to online learning. Tell us all about that.
Well, I appreciate that too. And, I have a lot of conversations with Superintendent Davis, always very helpful, shared part of their plan with us back and forth so we can try to learn from each other. And we do that around the neighborhood, especially Brian. So I always appreciate his help. And our team then, what kind of has to happen is you have grade levels and department levels at 13 different grades, and you're trying to figure out how to build this plan in about 10 days. So in a kind of the short version was our assistant superintendent for curriculum is really pretty amazing. It's Dr. Brandy Mendham, and she worked with the teacher leaders. And they kind of created a template, and then the teacher leaders met with their either grade levels if they're elementary or subject levels if they're in the secondary, and they started building 1 week plans. So our plan will be that every Monday morning, and it started this past Monday, those suggestions and lots of things to pick from for students and parents are posted on our websites on Monday morning, and off they go.
Yes, indeed. Shelter in the Storm, an interesting title for the program. Tell us about that.
Well, I was Brad Johnson is a motivational speaker in education. I follow him on Twitter, and I just happened to notice this one day. But what I've been using this with our team, describing to them, teachers are used to getting A's. So we're probably became teachers because we were good at school. And we don't generally settle for things that aren't just top notch. And so what we tried to say to our team was, you are going to rebuild what took us literally decades to build the first time, and you're going to rebuild it in about 10 days. So we are not rebuilding our entire house in the storm. We're in a storm. We're just going to build a temporary shelter to get us through this storm. So let's not worry about making it perfect before we get started. Let's get started, and then we'll fine tune it as we go. So that's kind of where that came from.
And as you mentioned, when we chatted the day after Governor Whitmer discussed the extension of closing the schools, the in-person learning aspect for the rest of the academic 2020 year, you mentioned that you and the Zeeland Public School staff and teachers were already thinking during the first closing, which was a month or so ago, about this eventuality. You were preparing for this.
Yeah, you could kind of see it coming if you watch across the state or across our country what was happening in other states where it was ramping up, the COVID was ramping up, and at a 1,000-fold increase. It's kind of like our local superintendents looking at a snow day. We don't try to make individual decisions. We're asking for what are you doing and what do you think? And when the states around the country, and I suspect the governors are probably talking to each other too, they're trying to get an idea. When you can see other schools were closing down, we had that data daily on which states were closing down. You could sense at least it was going to be longer. So our team was kind of after it, trying to figure out, okay, what will that look like? And so we got a little bit of an advanced plan.
We're talking with Zeeland School Superintendent Cal DeKuiper. If you have a question for Cal, we'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. The Ottawa County Intermediate School District, which handles Zeeland schools, and the majority of the schools in our listening area, all but Fenville, is a part of the OAISD, came up with its guidelines for remote learning. Part of what the governor had said when she mandated that no more in classroom learning was that the districts, each individual district could formulate its own plan, but it has to be cleared through the regional ISD. I believe there's 56 of them statewide before it cleared. When you saw what the OAISD brought out and what you, not you personally, Cal, but what Zeeland Public Schools did and it was formulating, did you say, you know what, they're right, we're right on with them, but there's a couple of little curveballs that they threw? Or was it pretty much, well, we're doing what they're doing already, no problems?
Yeah, a little bit of both, but it wasn't their curveball or an intended curveball. So what kind of happens is The state, I think, properly, and in this case, instead of having 800 school districts all send their forms into the Department of Education, said, why don't you clear these things through the ISD? I also think the state did a really good job in recognizing that all of our programs are going to be different because every school district's a little different. Some have online capabilities, some don't, different needs. So that was fine. And so really the template was pretty straightforward. Our ISD did a really good job with that. The curious curveballs are once you start looking at the detail of which laws and which policies we're required to follow, which ones are being set aside and which ones aren't by either executive order or future decisions. And then most special education law is federal. So when the state can make some decisions, then all of a sudden we have to try to figure out, well, how does that work with the federal application? So it got a little complicated within a matter of a couple of days, but we landed in a good place.
Let's talk about special education because it is a special needs that needs to be addressed. And sometimes you don't want to have kids fall through the cracks, be it in special needs or be it economic situations. Before we talk about the economic situations, the special needs, how is that being addressed with Zeeland Public Schools during this shelter in a storm, shall we say?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy with what we're doing. And our special education team said, hey, we will call every family. So they've all got an individual plan, IEP, individual educational plan. But how do you do occupational therapy? How do you do speech therapy, physical therapy when you are not in physical contact or in the same space as another student? So some things, I'm struggling in reading or in math, we can handle, but others we can't. So our team said, we will call and talk to each family that's on our caseload, and we will figure out together what we can and can't accomplish within the parents' comfort zone, because some certainly are medically compromised. We have to be very careful, but others are fairly minor situations. So we truly are building individual plans one at a time, and a compliment goes to our team for making it work that way.
Now, the other challenge is those who are economically challenged. Obviously, there's perception for the most part, Zeeland Public Schools, people there have a nice living and can be able to afford some of the good things. But like every school district has to face, not every young man or woman in the system has access to the internet, has access to electronic equipment, or have access to food, being part of the SNAP program, school lunch meals and stuff like that. That's a challenge that needed to be met by not only Zeeland schools, but all districts in across Michigan during Stay Home, Stay Safe.
Right, and we're not there yet. We have a plan, and that's part of what we're doing now. So what you're talking about in this topic is our biggest concern, because if we're a school system that truly cares about all kids, we got to figure that out. So far, when most of our communication has been through email or a Z for Me or other social media platforms that everybody uses, but someone out there is not connected or doesn't have that capability at home, they're not in the know. So we're sending these paper forms that copy what we're doing online in our meal distribution. And so that each of the meals that go out now have it enclosed. Here's where it goes. Well, we're still concerned that there are probably more that we're not missing. So Ginger Smith is our communications director, and just yesterday finished, we're going to do it in a postcard idea. And this is something that I borrowed from Brian Davis at Holland. I liked what he was doing there and their team. And we're going to mail a postcard to every one of our ZPS families. So just in case we're missing somebody, we can, hey, we're doing this. And if you need internet connection, call this number and we'll give you advice on where it's free right now. If you need technology at home, we can help you with that because we have your one-to-one devices here. So we're probably within about 10 days of having that part of the plan where I feel more comfortable about it. I think we're missing some kids right now.
Good morning. You're on the line with Zeeland School Superintendent Cal DeKuiper. And unfortunately, we are guest specific. So you have a question for Cal, he'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. You addressed this a little bit in our earlier Zoom conversation this month, Cal, and I want to bring it back up again for those who may have missed it during our conversation that aired on WHTC Morning News. The class of 2020 at Zeeland East and Zeeland West High Schools. They've had a tough senior year, be it Eastern equine encephalitis in the fall and now COVID-19 in the spring. They get their degree, they get their high school diplomas, unfortunately, probably be mailed to them. But some of the things that other senior classes have taken for granted, the class of 2020, not going to have. No senior prom. And if there's a commencement, you're going to try to get it later, but it might not be as easy as you might think.
Yeah, this just breaks my heart because these are rites of passage in the United States in the way we do things. It's a big milestone to graduate, and I think about these kids that have been, the one that I think it just, you understand. There's really two of them. There's a young lady who had been kind of set aside for a couple of years and was going to be the lead singer in the musical and doesn't get that one chance, or a young woman who is going to be the pitcher on a ball team, and all those different examples, and state championship track teams in Zeeland, and they have almost all their athletes back. And boy, they've been running all winter long, and I was looking forward to that. And I know you're connected to swimming, and imagine being a swimmer, and on the day of the meet, the state meet, it gets postponed. So you're tapered, ready to, all of those things. So I like what they did in the executive orders for education, at least for seniors. No harm will be done academically for their grades or graduation. So it's in their favor. So we're going to do things. You can have your letter grade if you want it. It can go to credit, no credit. If anybody had a shot in the dark of passing, you will pass and you will graduate. Now, those are littler things in the big picture. I didn't get those experiences that I was hoping for in life, but we are committed to having a graduation ceremony whenever that might be. And we have not picked a date because things change every day, but we're going to do our very best to get a graduation, let them walk across the stage.
Yeah, it's so easy to talk about the athletic missed opportunities, but you brought it out, and I've mentioned it as well. The other opportunities for performing in a musical or playing in a band concert at the end. I mentioned about senior prom. Those things we take for granted. And yes, it might be a bigger celebration next year, but once somebody graduates, they're off to the four winds, be it college, be it trade school, be it the military.
Yes.
And the opportunities just go by. Again, if you have a question for Cal DeKuiper, you'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. The governor says school facilities need to be vacant right now. We touched upon this in our earlier conversation, Cal, about the fact that, trying to keep the schools clean and disinfected so that when classes do resume, it's going to be in a safe situation. Facilities go beyond just the actual school buildings, and I'm talking about Zeeland Stadium. It's a public facility, but right now, it can't be used for track, can't be used for soccer, but the public wants to use it.
That is a tough one for us. So, the tennis courts can be open. People can be socially distanced easily. Our fields that are opened, Dr. Heidel in the Community Health Department, Ottawa County Health Department, did ask that we put signs up that the playground equipment should not be used right now because we can't keep that sterile and clean. But the one place we're really struggling is Zeeland Stadium, and it is a locked facility with turf field, and it's millions of dollars, and schools are supposed to be closed. And what has happened is we thought we might be able to leave it open, but we would have groups of people playing different games and things nowhere close to socially distanced. And so we locked the gate. And I just want our community to know that we're doing everything we can to keep that facility off use. And we hope people that give those people on the front line medical a chance to do what they need to do. And let's do our part and not be in the Zeeland Stadium. You know, if you're a track athlete, we had college kids coming back. They just wanted to practice their skill, you know, and I get that. Unfortunately, you know, or not fortunately or unfortunately, but really just a different part of life. You know, this is a life and death situation here. So we need to take that seriously and leave the stadium off limits.
All right, I'm going to bring up this topic and this subject. Maybe it's our last one, but it is perhaps the toughest. And maybe we can't answer that right now, Cal DeKuiper. The impact down the road of this situation. Yes, right now we're only maybe week 4, but this might be lasting far beyond, 4 weeks might be just a drop in the bucket over what some say might be a 12 to 18 month situation if we don't have a vaccine, waiting for a vaccine, waiting for mass inoculations, so that the herd situation, for lack of a better term, the herd ability, so people can congregate again, it might take that long.
Yeah.
And we might have to have remote learning to begin 2021. It's to beside the academic 2021 besides now. How fearful are you about the long-range impact of education among the students now in the system and moving through the system, having to go through this?
Well, I tell you, we are making, level 1 plans. We're not digging too deep into it yet, but certainly we're setting some parameters for what could next fall look like in both. I'm not certain how we would figure out who all of our students are or are not when they don't actually come to the school to see them and be counted, so to speak. Well, good morning, Bill, glad to have you back.
Yeah.
So that'll be an issue. Going online, I think we could pull that off for a while. I'm thinking things in the fall are probably going to have strict rules for spectators, whether it's theater or athletics or a field trip and all of those kind of things. I'm hopeful that the business community takes the lead and starts, which I think they will. They're really good at this, and they'll take the lead working with the legislature and the governor's office. And what are the rules for social distancing so we can get businesses back opened again? And if we could apply some of those same things to school, we'll be consistent with each other. So there's a real possibility of it, and we have to be prepared either way.
Let's get to a line to somebody on it. Good morning. You're on the line with Cal DeKuiper of Zeeland Schools.
Good morning. I have just a question about, so the kids have not been in or will not be in school and will not be doing any new learning, from mid-March to the beginning of June. So that's about 2.5 months. So I'm wondering, how is that material going to be covered? How is that learning material going to be covered? Especially for those classes that build on each other, kids going from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. How is that going to be covered?
Yeah, that's the right question. And I'm asked that one a lot. And actually, that's the right subject. It's usually math when we build so much, and the others you can pick and choose a little bit. I've had parents ask me if they should hold their children back because they're not going to be ready for the next class. And so there's really 2 things to look at here, and then the answer to your question, where I think it is now. So the right question, 100% of the students in Michigan are in this same boat. So we are all really in the same spot for our learning levels. And so let's say a 4th grader at the end of 4th grade now it's hard to move ahead in learning. So what are we missing? So I think next fall, the challenge for schools is going to be, how do we start 4th grade by trying to catch up on some of the things in 3rd grade before we pick up on the 4th grade material? And how do we do that? Some of our teachers are already talking about that. I think we can do it in the elementary a lot easier than we can at maybe the high schools, because then not all courses lead to the same next course. They might pick a different pathway in math or in science or social studies. So you'll be a little curious there. I take a little comfort in that in other places of our country, when it wasn't the whole country, it was maybe the fires of Los Angeles or an earthquake or a hurricane where buildings got shut down for months and months. Schools were able to recover in that format. So it's not like Michigan or Zeeland schools has to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from people who have been through this, and we're told that people do recover and catch up, but it's not going to happen in just a couple of months. So good question. It's the right question.
Are you looking at starting school earlier? To catch
Right
up
now,
on
we're not.
2.5 months worth of material?
Yeah, it's possible. I don't see that happening because we're not hearing that from our community that that's what they want yet. But that's part of the conversation that we'll have. The governor did open it that you could start school as early as August 7, I think, in one of the executive orders. And those are conversations that are just now getting started, but we're not hearing that from our community, and we're really not trying to plan too far out because it was just about 4 or 5 weeks ago that we were heading in one direction, and now we're heading in a whole new direction, and we're trying to figure out if the economy and everything's going to open up in June. So we're kind of creating a 2 or 3 different scenarios for that one. But starting school isn't really a prime discussion for us yet.
Right. Okay, but at least it maybe could be an option if things start to open up. But okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for the call. Yes, we are running a little long, but that is okay because very important things that we need to pass on to the community. What we are going to do, Cal, button things up right now. We will have the podcast of our conversation with you audio-wise at WHTC.com. We are video recording this Zoom conversation. We'll put that on our Facebook page a little bit later on this afternoon. And we graciously thank Cal DeKuiper for joining us today to allow this and also to get us caught up with what's going on in the district. Again, the website zps.org is how to get a hold of things going on in Zeeland Public Schools. Cal, thank you very much for joining us today on Talk of the Town.
Thanks for the invitation always.
Thank you very much, Cal DeKuiper on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC. Steve Kathan has CBS News coming up in a few moments. Peg McNick will have WHTC News. We'll have some open line time coming your way at the after that. And then we'll have our WHTC Midday Report on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.